This is a podcast about one woman's mission to help entrepreneurs and business owners write better business books. Each week, we tackle your writing excuses, because there are excuses too, and help you beat the blank page of doom so that you can write the book that'll grow your life and your business. Now here's your host, Vicky Fraser.
Hello and welcome to the 1000 Authors Show. I'm Vicky Quinn Fraser and this is my husband, Joe.
Hello.
Hello. And this is Noodle. I don't know if you can hear Noodle purring. Sounds like, I think I can see it. I reckon there's a purr going on there. So Noodle is also involved in this podcast. He's sitting on my knee. Mm-hmm. And we would like to wish you a very happy new year.
Yay.
Yay, because it's the first podcast of 2022, which seems to be shaping up a lot like 2021, to be honest, and COVID not fucking off.
Yes.
So, we are drinking, I haven't tasted it yet, actually. Have you tasted it?
Yes.
Do you like it?
It's all right.
We're drinking Bird and Blend tea. So I am in the Bird and Blend tea club, and they send me 3 little sachets of tea a month for me to drink in my office. And this one is festive tea, and it is mulled cider flavour. So obviously non-alcoholic and really delicious. It might replace mulled alcoholic drinks for me.
It might do. It's all right.
Tasty. So yes, recommended. Okay, what's been going on? Joe, what are you reading at the moment?
Oh my goodness. I'm reading Throne of the Crescent Moon by Saladin Ahmed.
Is it good?
Yes.
Father Christmas brought it for you, didn't he?
Father Christmas brought it for me. And yeah, it's really good.
Oh, good.
Yeah, I like it.
I'm glad.
It's nice to have a kind of fantasy, I read quite a lot of fantasy stuff, and it's nice to have one from an Arabic viewpoint.
Yes.
An Arabic world one.
Yeah.
Which is kind of unusual, because normally they're all a bit Western. It's all a bit fur boots and, dragons.
Nordic.
Yeah.
And that is actually very appropriate to what we're going to be talking about today. Really? So we'll come back to that. Because I, at the moment, I'm reading The Diary of Lady Murasaki.
Okay.
Which is not fiction. It's an actual diary. I'll talk about it a little bit more later in the episode because it's, again, very relevant to what today's topic is. But yeah, it was written about 1,000 years ago by a court lady in waiting in Japan.
About 1,000 years ago?
About 1,000 years ago. Right at the beginning when... And this is something that I've learned from reading the Diary of Lady Murasaki. The Japanese had no written language until they made contact with the Chinese.
Okay.
And their written language came from Chinese characters and Chinese alphabet. Well, not really alphabet, but, Chinese characters. And then developed into a written Japanese form. Really interesting. And because women, Heian women, and Heian is the era that we're talking about here, that Lady Murasaki was part of, Heian women were discouraged from learning or writing Chinese for whatever reason. Okay. But she learned it. I think she just overheard her brother's lessons and things like that. But she learned it. But because of that, Japanese women were instrumental in developing the Japanese written language because they were forbidden from Chinese. So they just developed their own written language. And that is something that has happened all over the world with groups of people who have been traditionally excluded from, the elitist methods of writing and reading. They've developed their own languages and their own systems and all of the rest of it. It's really interesting. So but I did not know that Japan didn't have its own writing system before they came into contact with China. So super interesting, learning all sorts of things. I don't really know anything much about Japan, ancient or modern. And so this is really cool. We'll talk about that a bit more later. And my non-fiction book is still The Art of Gathering by Priya Parker. I have nearly finished it. It's a great book. I know it sounds like it's not very good because it's taken me so long, but it's such a good book. Really enjoying it. And I'm powering through it again now that I am not ill anymore, which brings me on to... Yeah.
This week at Casa Dingle.
Oh, this week at Casa Dingle, which has mostly... I had my booster vaccination on the 27th of December, and by the evening of that day was under a blanket where I stayed for basically an entire week.
Yeah, 6 days, I think.
I don't remember being that ill since I had my appendix out. I was really not very well. It was not very pleasant at all, and Joe looked after me so well. Just basically put Elder Scrolls Oblivion computer game in front of me and brought me tea. And I made really good progress. I was too ill to even concentrate on reading, and that was the really frustrating thing. I just couldn't sit and read. So, but I am very thankful for vaccines, because if that's what the reaction to the jab is like, I definitely don't want COVID.
Yeah.
You didn't have any reaction to it, really, did you?
No, I had no reaction to the boost. I had a wobbly half an hour after one of the primary doses, but it was also, we'd had it in the morning and then we'd laid concrete slabs all day in the sunshine.
Yes, I remember.
And I'm not really sure whether it was just a bit of hot and dehydration and sunstroke, or if it was a reaction to the injection in the morning.
Yeah. Whereas for my first two, I had 24 hours of feeling a little bit rubbish and then was like absolutely fine. And with this, it knocked me off my feet for a week, and I'm still suffering the after effects a little bit. I've just started handstand training again today, which went better than I thought it would actually. But yeah, it's interesting. I wonder if, because you've been a bit sniffly, I wonder if I had a bit of a cold at the same time and they combined to destroy me.
Yeah, maybe. Maybe. But yeah, it's been that whole Twixmas period was just...
Oh, we had plans. We were going to do so much stuff in the bathroom, and I was going to read and I was going to write, and it was going to be great, and we're going to go on an adventure. And what actually happened was I hid under a blanket.
Yeah, nothing.
Didn't get to see your family, and yeah.
Yeah, rubbish.
But this week, we've bought a bunch of bathroom stuff.
So much money on bathroom stuff.
Bought a shower tray, we've bought a shower, we've bought all of the gubbins that I don't even remember. We just bought stuff. Which was supposed to arrive today.
It did not arrive today.
Did not arrive today. So I'm going to look into that. And yeah, that's what's been happening with us.
Cool.
How's your first couple of days back at work been?
It's been all right. It hasn't been too traumatic. Struggled a little bit to get out of bed in the morning, but that's because we spent a week doing nothing and not getting up early. But it's all right. It works quite nicely.
Oh, we did do something. We built an egg shelter box.
We did build a box for eggs to live in. One of the things that we have is chickens at the dingle.
Yeah.
And
currently 7.
Currently 7, and that encourages us to sell eggs to the village.
Yeah, 4, and they all go to the British Hen Welfare Trust charity. All of the
proceeds, which is great. But it means that if I'm not working from home and able to answer the front door, we end up with villagers wandering around looking for eggs.
And they actually sometimes walk into my office without knocking. They just open the door and walk in, and I'm like, dude, I'm talking to a client who is paying me a hefty sum of money for my brain.
Yes.
Get out.
Get out.
So yeah, and it's really difficult because like I'm sure that I'm really bad at controlling my face, so I'm sure my face says a lot of things. But also, it's just like, don't walk into people's houses.
Place of
Offices,
business.
place of business. Yeah, so anyway, to stop that, we've created an egg shelter, and people can just come up and help themselves and then pop their money in the jar.
If we have eggs, that's where they'll be.
Yeah, and we made it out of scraps of bits as well. So the base of it is part of a joist, a ceiling joist, floor joist.
Floor joist.
And then the side, and then the bits of batten, leftover scraps of batten formed the frame, and then we used some roof tiles that we just did not get around to putting on the old porch.
We had. Yeah.
So yeah, we've just used those, and it works really well. It's smart, man.
It's smart.
Anyway, and that is a story about.
Was it a story?
Well, kind of an anecdote. It would have been a story if I had been better prepared, but it's a tiny story. It's the kind of thing that could be turned into a tiny story, and that is an awkward segue into this week's topic, which is why the world needs your stories.
Okay.
Because tiny stories are the fabric of our lives, and they are the fabric of the whole world, and they are the only thing that really changes anything or connects us with other people, and they help us make sense of the world, right?
Okay.
And I've been interviewed today about this, and so it got me, and that's why we're doing this on the podcast. And it just got me thinking about, because the person who interviewed me asked me why I do what I do and why it means so much to me. And so I, much more eloquently than I'm probably going to do now, explained to her why I care so much about this. And so for most of recorded history, I've heard a really narrow set of stories, right? And a really narrow set of, a really narrow viewpoint about the world.
The elite's opinions.
Yeah. And so like in ancient Egypt, we've got stories from priests and pharaohs. And the stories they put out depended on who was in charge at the time. In Greece and Rome, the kings and emperors and priests told the stories and put things out there. In Nazi Germany, Hitler and the Nazis told the stories. They told lies about all kinds of people and shaped the way people thought about other humans. In the modern UK and the USA, the church and rich old white people tell the stories and control the narrative and the media. And the reason that has happened is because those people, the elites of their times and places, controlled wealth, which was required for publishing and disseminating information, and thus creating the stories that were fed to us and that shape our worlds. Right, and you can see this today. I'm constantly trying to get people to pay attention to newspaper headlines and tabloid headlines and news headlines and the way they're written, because this shit's important. And there's a really good example of this, actually, that I shared on Instagram the other day. And I'm just gonna... Okay, so I found it, and this is why language and the words we use matter, and why it's important to pay attention to newspaper headlines and the way they're written, and realize what it is that they're doing, either consciously or, either deliberately, to make us feel a certain way. And if you want an example of that, just look at the headlines about Meghan Markle versus the headlines about Kate and Wills. Mm-hmm. They're vastly different, and it's really shocking. But a really good example that I used the other day was a headline in the New York Post, which went, "Woman stabbed at Bronx subway station after ignoring man's advances." And I unpicked that a little bit because the passive voice suggested it's something that just happened to this woman, and that it was her fault. Let's rewrite that a little bit and see how it lands differently. Man stabs woman after repeatedly harassing her at Bronx subway station. Massively different. It just lands massively differently. It makes you think about it massively differently. It's no longer something that happens to a woman because of something she did. It now becomes something that someone did to her. Mm-hmm. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
So, that's why it's really, really important to pay attention to how things are written and the words we use and the language we use, and also how that kind of thing influences the stories we tell and the world that it shapes around us. And that's how the Nazis rose to power. That kind of storytelling was a key. That kind of propaganda was a key ingredient for their rise to power, and you can see it all over the world. And it starts the same way, and every kind of totalitarian regime starts exactly the same way. It starts with dehumanizing people and telling stories. It's really, really interesting. Anyway, so that's why it's really important to get other different stories out there, different viewpoints out there, so that we don't only ever see one viewpoint. So we don't only ever hear one way of talking about things. Does that make sense?
Sure, yeah.
Yeah. And even outside of politics and the news media, the view that we see is very narrow. Hollywood tends to be very samey, right? Mm-hmm. And yes, there's Bollywood and Nollywood, but we don't see so much of that in the Western world. We have to go and look for it, which is harder work, so most people don't. But like the stories that often shout the loudest are the rags to riches ones, big drama, that kind of thing. And, Matrix, the world is ending, humanity's been enslaved by robots kind of stuff. And that is, that makes sense because they make good stories, or they make good plots. And it's the same in the business world as well. So the stories that we hear most loudly are like the rags to riches ones. It's like, oh, I lived in my car for a year, I'm down to my last $20. And they are good stories. They do make good stories, but we can't always relate to them because most of us, thankfully, have not been in that situation. But they also have another side effect as well. All of this kind of big dramatic storytelling has another side effect of just confirming our suspicion that in order to write and publish our stories, the stories we tell must be big. It's
got to be alien invasion or end of the world or... Yeah.
Exactly. And if you look at stories like The Matrix and things like that, actually the plot is only ever a vehicle for the story anyway. That's what plot is. But the story is not about alien robots, enslaving the human race. The story is about Neo waking up and learning to navigate this new world. That's what the story is. It's how he changes. And that's what we're interested in. If it was just, we've all seen really rubbish sci-fi films, right, where there's loads of plot and no story, and you just don't care about the characters. Snakes on a Plane is a really good example. It's just like ridiculous nonsense. But do you actually care about what happens to any of the characters?
No.
And there's a reason for that. There's no connection, and that whole thing misses the point. So stories are about connection, and any tiny little story can be absolutely riveting. And if you want an example of that, go read David Sedaris's stories. Read Joan Didion's essays if you want proof of that. They talk about watch a soap opera. Those are, occasionally somebody crashes a plane in the Arches, but mostly it's just mundane day-to-day life stuff, right?
Yeah.
Gossip. This is why people love gossip. There's like a really snobby idea that people who gossip are somehow, somehow lesser humans than those lofty people who don't gossip. It's like everybody gossips. literally everybody gossips.
Yeah, we're designed to be interested in what's going on around us. The things that we hear about each other are important stories, and form the threads of life around us.
Absolutely. And if it's all aeroplanes crashing on us all the time, then that would be exhausting. So yeah, and the whole point of this is, and the whole point of, you know, what I'm doing is kind of twofold. That we want to feel seen and heard and be understood, right? That's a key human need and want. And telling our personal stories helps us to be seen and heard and understood. And it also helps our readers to be seen and heard and understood as well, because the most responses that I get to the stories I tell are quite often ones that they surprise me at first, because I'm like, that's not an email or an article that I'm particularly proud of. And yet I'll have said something that makes that connection with people. And they'll relate to it, and they'll be like, oh my God, it's like you're inside my head. And it's like you're writing directly for me. And it's because I often tap into something that's universal.
Yes.
Doesn't have to be big and important. And another important reason, and this is going back to who controls the media and the narratives, like I realized really early on that there was a massive chunk of life missing from my worldview, and I'm sure you did as well when you went to university. But like I grew up in a white lower middle class area. That was my life. The books I read reflected that. They reflected the life and the people that I was around. But as I got older, I saw on TV and later on the internet that actually the world is much bigger than that. And so I guess you probably found the same thing as well.
Yeah, same kind of deal, you know. White middle class area. I can still remember the name of the first brown person who I was at school with. So I came from a very, very limited, controlled and organised little world. And broadening those horizons and sharing the stories is part of breaking out of that.
Exactly. And so you kind of realise, I think for a lot of people, and I do honestly think a lot of people sleepwalk through life as well. They don't really pay that much attention to what's going on. And I think there has been a bit of an awakening over the past couple of years, because we've all been kind of stuck in our small worlds, and we've been looking at the internet, and stuff has happened outside that we maybe wouldn't have paid attention to before. It's like we suddenly realise that there are people out there with different ways of doing things. That maybe our way of doing things isn't the right way, it's just a way. Maybe it's not even the best way.
Maybe it's not the way we want anymore.
Maybe it's not the way we want anymore.
Maybe earning the money so that you can commute to work and spend that money on a property that allows you to live somewhere near where you work, so that you can, and it's just a big circular thing that you just maybe don't enjoy.
And but also like even wider than that as well, looking at how different cultures do things, and how the world works in different cultures. And I'm thinking specifically about Spain, where people joke about Spanish time and afternoon siestas, and they're not spending all of their time working. And it's like, well, hang on a minute, why is that a bad thing?
Yeah.
Why do I need to be working for 10 hours a day in order to feel like, I don't know, superior to other people?
There's that old jokey story, isn't there, about the farmer, the fisherman living next to a beach, and he goes out every day at dawn and catches 5 fish and sells them to his neighbours, and that enables him to spend all afternoon
chilling,
lazing on the beach and playing with his children, and the next day he goes out and catches more fish. And then a Western businessman comes along and says, well, you're great at this, you should commercialise this, you need a bigger boat, you need to employ some people, you need to catch thousands of fish, and you need to do all of this stuff and develop and industrialise. And the guy's like, why? And he's like, well, so that you can take the afternoon off, you can have loads of money, you can take time off and spend time with your kids. And he's like, well, I do that anyway.
Yeah. But it's just
we don't have to chase that, bigger, better, more.
Yeah. That's one of those daft stories that is banded around on LinkedIn a lot, but it's true. And it's just, it is a illustration of the stories that we are fed by the people at the top who are in power. And this is not me being like conspiracy theory, they're all controlling our brains, but there is a vested interest in keeping the status quo as it is. The people at the top benefit from the way things are done right now. And, it doesn't benefit everybody. It benefits a very small group of people.
Sure.
So it's really, really important to note where the stories are coming from and then think about why. And so, kind of going back to back to the storytelling aspect, it's like there are different ways of doing things out there. There are different cultures, religions, customs, languages, hopes and dreams. And
just because you thinking about your own story from your own worldview, you might think, well, this isn't much of a story and it's not very interesting. But to a whole bunch of people, it could be revolutionary, it could be different, it could be a window into a completely different world.
Yeah, absolutely. And just talking about stuff that matters to you, it's going to matter to other people as well. And if you can tell that story well and connect with those other people, then that's going to make a massive and profound difference. We don't change the world from the top down. We change it from down here. And one of my mentors talks about that. Like the world, the economy, society is a complex adaptive system. You cannot change it from the top down. It won't happen. You have to change it from within, doing little things like make the world better for you and the people around you. Learn what's going on outside of your little bubble and apply that stuff. And by changing those little things, the whole system changes eventually. It doesn't happen fast. If it does happen fast, it's usually pretty traumatic. But yeah, that is the way things change. And underneath all of that kind of top level stuff, the different cultures and religions and customs, underneath all that are humans with stories who care about the same shit we care about. And it might be dressed up in a different way and coloured in differently, but ultimately we care about our families, our friends, getting food, shelter, staying safe, building, making some meaning for yourself in the world. And that is a universal human thing. Yeah. Is that connection. And when we hear those stories, when we hear stories from other people, like stories that we have to go out and seek because they're not necessarily going to be fed to us by mass media. That's when we start connecting with other people across time and space. And that is the power, for me, that's the power of books. That's the enduring power of books. And that's where I'm going to circle back round again to Lady Murasaki's diary, because that was written more than 1,000 years ago in Japan. And I am separated from this writer by 10 centuries and like a gaping chasm of cultural differences and religious differences and ethnic differences. And every time I pick the book up to read it, I am struck by how similar she is to me. And like the things that she notices and the things that she cares about. And she's recording. Okay, so she is quite a highborn lady. She's a lady in waiting, and she's recording a big event, the birth of a prince. But she's also writing a journal as like a normal woman in service with a job, and sure. She would be fairly typical of any woman at that time who wasn't kind of working in the fields and stuff. And her observations are just really striking in their familiarity. And it's just a really cool thing to read. And one of my favourite quotes, this is one that stuck out to me, that she wrote, and she's also a beautiful writer, by the way. As day dawned, I looked outside and saw the ducks playing about on the lake as if they had not a care in the world. Can I remain indifferent to those birds on the water? I too am floating in a sad and uncertain world. That could have been written yesterday. So, that's, and it's not exciting. It's a tiny moment in time that she has painted, and like I can see the ducks on like in what in my head passes for a traditional Japanese garden or whatever. But yeah, I mean, has there ever been a sadder, more uncertain world for us to be in? It doesn't feel like it to us, but obviously 1,000 years ago, people, you know what I mean?
Yeah, she had the same feelings.
Yeah, maybe there wasn't COVID, but there was other shit going on.
Yeah, for sure.
And so yeah, like yes, Lady Murasaki, I feel the same. Feel the same. It doesn't matter that she's highborn or writing 1,000 years ago. This is a universal insight. And, that, yeah, I don't know. We can't make the world more certain. I don't think anything can, because complex adaptive system and all that.
Yeah, unless you're in charge of, large geopolitical organisations or countries.
And even then, you can't just
change stuff.
No, not without chaos. But I think we can make it less sad and more joyful. And I think that one of the ways that we can do that is telling and seeking out stories that transport us somewhere else and teach us something and connect us with people who are unlike us. And I think there's a lot of joy to be had from that. And that's why I want different people to come to me and tell their stories. I want to help people tell their stories. The little ones, the little stories that maybe you think don't matter, but they really do. And that's not to say, like, you have to tell a boring story. You've got to tell a story well, because it's really easy to just tell a mundane story and it to be boring. But learn to tell a story well, and you can make anything fascinating and funny and entertaining to somebody. And if you want to learn how to do that, read David Sedaris. Particularly start with the story about his unflushable poo. Because we've all been there, right? We've all been at a party and we've gone to the toilet and we've done a poo and then we've been like, oh man, why will this thing not flush? Why will it not flush? And he spends like 3,000 or 4,000 words on this, and it is hilarious because he goes into such detail, not like gross,
not like nutty detail,
not like gross and disgusting detail, but just all of the thoughts going through his head,
fears and the thoughts and the worries and the
if I don't leave now, then people are going to know. But if I like wait a bit, then people might think it was someone else. And the machinations that go through your head. And it's just, it's about the most mundane thing you can imagine. And yet it's an incredibly memorable story.
Certainly not a unique experience.
Definitely not a unique experience. I bet everybody who's listening to this has been like, yeah, been there. It's never ever been easier to tell our stories, right? The gatekeepers are no longer the all-powerful keepers of who gets to read stuff and who gets to publish books. We can reach people more easily than ever before, and that's why I think it's even more important to learn your craft, learn to write well, learn to tell a story well, and then tell your story. Because whilst it's never been easier to tell your story, it's also really now easy to put out a lot of crap, and that doesn't help anyone either. So, yeah.
Nice.
Thanks. I actually have an exercise for people to start with as well. Because the lady who interviewed me asked me for a tip about how to kind of start writing these stories about yourself. And I had one. Yeah. And so make a timeline. Write a timeline of your life. And just start with the obvious stuff. Like I was born here, and then, this happened, and then I got married on this day, all of the big stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And then start going a little bit deeper. So think of stuff that happened around them. And it's like, oh, okay, so that was a birthday. Or when I was about that age, I would have gone on holiday. And one of the examples that I could use here is one of the big things that happened in my life was when my first boyfriend dumped me, right? Terribly tragic, trauma, awful experience. Your first love dumps you. It's never pleasant, is it? But actually, that's not the thing that shaped me. The thing that shaped me about that was the letter that my mom's friend sent me when she heard how distraught I was and what a horrible time I was having. She sent me a letter that I still have. And what she wrote in that letter stuck with me. It took a long time, but I don't think I would be doing what I do now if it hadn't been for that letter.
Oh, nice.
Yeah. And so that's a story, and I will tell that story properly at some point, but that's a story that everyone can relate to. It's like everybody's been dumped, right? Or has had a relationship end and has had a first relationship end as a teenager, and it's been the end of the world and the worst thing ever. But you don't just tell that. For me, the meaning and the thing that I would talk about was that was a vehicle for that letter to arrive. Who knows what would have happened if I hadn't had it?
Yeah, nice.
Don't know. So yeah.
Have you told her?
Yes, I have. I have told her. What's the takeaway, Joe?
Takeaway, start writing your stuff, write about your life, learn storytelling techniques, and start publishing stuff, even if it's just on Instagram or Facebook or whatever.
Yeah.
And remember, you're always aiming to connect and entertain.
Well done. I love how you just read the stuff that I've written.
Yeah. Well, you write notes and I'm there,
Yeah.
That's my job.
It's cool. But yeah, I feel like this was a bit of a me monologuing episode. So next week, I think we'll have more of a conversation because I think people like you better.
You reckon? Need to give you more of a heads up of what we're going to do.
I like you better.
Well, I am likable.
You are. What is going on next week? I think we're going to talk about letting go of expectations, but let go of expectations because maybe we won't, and this week, I would like to invite you to join the Weird and Wonderful Book Society, because even though I launched it in December last year, I discovered very quickly that December is a terrible time to launch a 3-month writing program because nobody wants to start that before Christmas. Either that or my marketing was just appalling. But January is a good time to start a new thing. And after everything that you've just heard about writing your story and writing a book, come and write your book with us. Join an incredible group of women who are writing the most amazing stuff. So someone is writing about ridiculous ADHD brain stories and how she's turned that into her superpower, and she is just like a creativity genius. She's amazing. Somebody else is writing about the power of bigness, because you hear a lot of stuff about, introverts. There's a lot of books for introverts. Quiet by Susan Cain is a book that I really enjoyed. And my Weird and Wonderful client is writing about bigness and embracing your big personality and, you know, all of that kind of thing, which is really, and she's also a cracking writer. A lot of her stories remind me of David Sedaris. So if you're listening to this, you know who you are. And I hope you enjoyed that. Someone else is writing about the mental load and business ownership, and how just, you know, it's really irritating being a woman and a business owner and having a family. But that's not, it's not a big rant. There's a lot of good stuff going in there. Someone else is writing about why marketers are all awful and how to not be awful and be brilliant instead. About cognitive biases and really interesting stuff like that. And then I've also just now got a human rights lawyer turned writer who is writing her first book for a client on human movement, which is going to be really interesting. I'm very excited to get to know her a little bit better too.
Nice.
It's a really awesome group. And also I've got my author showcase for Weird and Wonderful Round 1 on January the 19th.
Nice.
At 7 p.m. GMT. Can you believe I remembered that one? I didn't write it down. Can you believe that?
That's incredible.
Remind me at some point in the future when it's not January anymore to tell you about surprise interviews. The fact that I'm just a useless sack of shit. But not now. So yes, come and join Weird and Wonderful. Go to moxiebooks.co.uk/Weird and Wonderful.
Nice.
Would love to have you. I promise you'll have an amazing time and you'll meet the most incredible people. If you're not sure, come to the author showcase. I will be shouting about that on Instagram and LinkedIn a lot.
Links in the show notes.
Links in the show notes. You can also get my free writing prompt calendar from moxiebooks.co.uk/calendar.
Nice.
Totally free. You don't even have to give me your email address, but I would really like it if you did come and join my email list because I'm nice and I write good things. And if you've listened to every episode, you can send me your address and I'll send you a silly gift.
A thing.
What do they do if they like this podcast, Joe?
If you like this podcast, go to iTunes and subscribe. It helps us climb the rankings, or go to Stitcher or wherever it is you get your podcasts and subscribe. Leave us a review.
Yes.
How many stars?
5.
If you don't want to review us with 5 stars.
Other podcasts are available.
They're
a lot better than this one.
It helps more people find us. Hopefully they laugh a bit and they learn something.
Yeah, people tell me they laugh. I don't know whether it's at us or with us, but I'll take it. And yeah, so you can send them a link to the podcast at moxiebooks.co.uk/podcast. All of that stuff is in the show notes, and just leaves me to say thank you, as usual, to Podfly for doing a sterling job editing my nonsense out and making us sound good. And thank you to Harriet for always keeping me in order and, you know, making stuff happen and reminding me that I have meetings. And thank you to you, Joe.
No worries.
Being my sidekick. Thank you to Noodle for joining in. And thank you to you, dear listener, for listening to this nonsense.
Well done.
We really appreciate you. And go and write your book.
See you next week.
Oh yeah, bye.
Thanks for listening. You can find links and show notes on the website at moxiebooks.co.uk/podcast, where you can also sign up for the best daily emails in the multiverse and find loads of free resources to help you write your book. We'll be back the same time next week with more tales from the book writing trenches and the latest on what the tiny sheeps have been up to.